We begin with a matter that surfaced on Friday, yes, and that is the long, almost topsy-turvy, tortuous road of constitutional reform in Jamaica. You know, we have been at this for more than 30 years now. We left British colonialism politically in 1962. That's 62 years ago. And we have talked, debated, quarrel, fight, verbally, over how we should reform our constitution in a way that is meaningful to our developmental agenda as a young fledgling society. And we have not made much progress in advancing that reform of the Constitution. We have made some steps, small steps, but after 62 years, we haven't gone far enough. I don't think anyone would disagree that we could have done so much more. Yes, we have now had more than 60 years experience at this, and we have had a lot of behavior, experiences, incidents, events that we should have learnt from in terms of improving our governance structures and improving them not only in meaningful ways but symbolically as well. And I craft it that way because symbolically, not even that we can achieve. Seemingly we are just stuck with what the founding fathers negotiated 62 years ago, and we have tinkered around the edges with the structures. We all seem to agree that we need to end the reign of the monarchy as a head of the Jamaican state. We all seem to agree on that. In the latest iteration of constitutional reform, we set up a constitutional reform committee with a membership drawn from both political parties and wider civil society. And if there's one thing we all seem to agree on, is that we must end the reign of the British monarchy as a titular head of the Jamaican state. Now we're learning from the opposition leader that he's not prepared to sign off on that. He wants to twin it with the more contentious issue, the issue that has divided the country, and that issue being what should be our apex court or court of final appeal. Should we stick with the Privy Council or should we go with the Caribbean Court of Justice that we have been instrumental in establishing and financing for more than 2 decades now? But it remains contentious. there's no consensus on whether we should stick with the Privy Council or go with the CCJ. And we have been debating that now for a long time. So much so that it is my understanding that we decided that, listen, we're going to push ahead with what there's consensus on. And the consensus is end the British monarchy as the head of state of Jamaica. We're going to go republic. There was the issue of whether we should go for an executive president or a ceremonial president. That delayed us for several years. Now we seem to have settled that we will go the route of the ceremonial head of state, with some powers, limited. And now Mr. Golding is saying that, listen, not even the push, the agreement to go with a Jamaican republic, he's prepared to sign off on. On Friday, Mr. Golding said his party will not sign the document, the draft document from the Constitutional Reform Committee, unless the contentious issue of Jamaica adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, is settled. What does that mean, given the contention? It means, in practical terms, we will be delayed again for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Because there's no consensus on that. And I don't want to start going into the debate and the arguments for and against the CCJ, because that is well ventilated. But frankly, when I heard the story on Friday, I was taken aback, because it was pretty much agreed that we know the PNP's position. The PNP has been very consistent. Yes, very consistent on us acceding to the jurisdiction of the CCJ. The JLP has waffled on that. Yeah? But the PNP has been very consistent. But there's division in the country, even within its own ranks, that's the PNP, over whether we should go the route of the CCJ or stay put with the Privy Council. So what is Mr. Golding saying now? For as long as it takes to settle the differences over the CCJ, we will continue to be a British colonial, post-colonial outpost where His Majesty the King will continue to be the head of state of Jamaica. That's what it means in practical terms. Mr. Golding should understand that these matters are difficult matters. And in the cut and thrust of a competitive democracy such as ours, you can play your card, you know. And my own take is that he's feeling his oats. He's in the political ascendancy. And he's wanting to flex his political muscles or perceptions of political strength. But don't forget, in our politics, there are ebbs and flows. Tides rise and fall. So don't push it. Yeah? We're not an authoritarian command state where you're going to dictate terms, where you're going to decide what happens, when, how, where. That's not the kind of democracy we are, sir. And if there's consensus that we go to the Republican status of Jamaica. Why delay that? Because we're not going the route yet of the CCJ. I think it is raw politics he's playing, and he must be called out for it. Raw politics. There's consensus on one thing. Let's do that and continue the agitation, the lobby for the CCJ. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Here's what Nora Gay Banton reported on Friday with the opposition leader's position.
It's been a year since Prime Minister Andrew Holness named a 14-member constitutional reform committee to guide the process of overhauling Jamaica's constitutional arrangements. The work of the committee has come in for much criticism. Civil society groups have called for more transparency and broader consultation on the matters under consideration. Despite those hurdles, co-chair of the committee and Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Fort, announced that the body had come to a consensus on the way forward and would be making its recommendations to Cabinet. But in a letter dated May 7, 2024, addressed to Prime Minister Andrew Holness, Mark Golding has indicated he's not prepared to play ball. He has instructed Donna Scott Motley and Anthony Hilton not to sign off on the recommendations of the committee. The two have been members of the body for 12 months and have been part of the deliberations on its work. Mr. Golding told the Prime Minister that unless the move from the British monarchy is paired with leaving the London-based Privy Council, the opposition would not approve the document. The PNP president also told the Prime Minister that leaving the Privy Council is a fundamental issue for his party. Mr. Golding says coupling the removal of the British monarch with accepting the Caribbean Court of Justice would allow the country to proceed on its constitutional reform process in a bipartisan manner that embraces what he describes as full decolonization. The report is shortly to be presented to the Cabinet for approval. Mr. Golding further told the Prime Minister that there are other issues in the final report that are of concern to the parliamentary opposition. He says those concerns will be shared with the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Fort. Mr. Golding did not outline them in his letter. The full contents of the report of the Constitutional Reform Committee have not been made public. Nora Gay Banton for Nationwide News.
Thank you, Nora. Despite Mr. Golding's insistence that his party will not sign off on the Constitutional Reform Committee recommendations until the issue of the CCJ settled and twinned to it, the minister leading the process in terms of ministerial responsibility, Marlene Malahoo Fort, she was very measured in her response. Very measured. She said that she remains hopeful that there will be consensus on the report. Here's Dana Davis' report on Mrs. Malahoo Fort's response.
Marlene Malahoo Fort is undeterred by Mark Golding's threat to withhold his support. She says the work must go on.
The CRC process has been worthwhile, and we have made great progress so far, but the work must continue until the task is done. While consensus of the government and opposition is a required step to advance reform of the deeply entrenched provisions, ultimately it is the people of Jamaica who will decide.
The minister says the report to be submitted to Cabinet contains only recommendations which received the full support of the committee members.
It is regrettable that the leader of the opposition has instructed his representatives on the committee not to sign the report, even though the report includes only those recommendations to which all members of the committee agreed.
In his letter to the Prime Minister announcing that his party's representatives would not sign the document, Mr. Golding appeared to suggest that Donna Scott Motley and Anthony Hilton did not have the authority to approve any recommendations on their own. Minister Malahoo Fort is maintaining that the work of the Reform Committee will be done in phases. According to the government's expressed timeline, the matter of the country's final appellate court will be dealt with in phase 2 of the process. The opposition leader is insisting that it be handled in phase 1 along with the question of replacing the monarchy. The minister is urging all Jamaicans to make their voice heard when the matter is put to a referendum. She says she remains hopeful.
It is the hope of the CRC that when the time comes, all eligible Jamaican voters will turn out and demonstrate that it is not about political preferences, but that you, the people, want a definitive say in our governance arrangements. I'm hopeful, I'm really hopeful that both government and opposition can work together to help create the Republic of Jamaica.
Dana Davey for Nationwide News.
I think Minister Malahoo Fort's response is commendable. Classy, and she's reading the room well. She's reading the room well. This is an issue that we have made very little progress on over the last 62 years. 1. 2, it is an issue that we need to maximize agreement on as a people. It is not an issue to flex political muscle and to ram it through based on whatever numbers you may have or perceived weakness or strength. No. And we need to say to Mark Golding this morning, what have you done to the members representing the opposition and the CRC? You have emasculated them. Gee. You have emasculated them. You have really reduced them to being observers, because of what value is their contribution if, having participated as they have, and there is agreement among all the members, you then turn around and cut them off at the knees. Huh? On a matter that has a long trajectory, long history of disagreements. You don't do that. That's not leadership. That's bullying. And that's not helpful. Marlene Malahoo Fort's response shows maturity. Maturity. It's 25 minutes after 10 o'clock. We learned this morning, or over the weekend, that there are more than 100 unregistered nursing homes operating in Jamaica. Nursing homes play a very, very important role, you know. As their names suggest, they nurse people back to health and nurture and nurse them to a state where they can continue to lead and to live lives that are meaningful, especially in their winter years. Yes, their winter years. There are thousands of Jamaicans who are now residents of nursing homes. I gather it's quite a thriving business because we're aging as a people. Yes, only this morning, the Observer lead story, time for change. Minister says country needs to reassess traditional notions of retirement. You should read it. There's a bit of statistic in the piece by the Observer this morning. Yeah? The Jamaica Population Health Status Report 2000 to 2022, which was tabled in the Parliament last week. Listen to this. The report stated that there were more than 576,000 Jamaicans under the age of 15 compared to 261,000 over the age of 65. However, and this is the rub, between 2000 and 2019, that's over a period of 2 decades, the child population below 15 decreased significantly, while the elderly population grew by almost 33% in the 19 years between 2000 and 2019. Now that tells us that we have an aging population, and therefore the role of nursing homes, the demand on nursing homes is increasing. So this is a very important bit of statistic revealed by the Director of the Standards and Regulation Division of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Cynthia Lewis Graham. Yeah? Her comment follows a public notice published recently in the newspapers, urging the operators of nursing homes, yes, to ensure that they are duly registered with the Ministry of Health.
Ministry's record, there are currently 170 unregistered facilities across the island.
Persons who are convicted of operating unregistered healthcare facilities can face a fine or imprisonment. Mrs. Lewis Graham says the ministry is giving operators a fair chance to get themselves registered.
Now, under the law, the penalty for operating an unregistered nursing home is a fine of $250,000 up to $500,000 and or imprisonment as determined by the resident magistrate. Anyone, bear in mind that anyone can initiate a lawsuit against a home. A deadline has not been decided at this time the actions to be taken against the non-compliant facilities. Remember, our purpose for issuing the public notice was to bring awareness, including to operators of these facilities who may be unaware of the registration requirements, to allow for them to be able to take the necessary action to become compliant.
And she pointed out that the enforcement has nothing to do with the collecting of taxes from the proprietors of the nursing homes. According to Mrs. Lewis Graham, it's all about the safety of the public and those who reside in these homes.
The application process for the registration of a nursing home is to ensure that the facilities are in a state of readiness to offer the types of services it intends to deliver, and we review documents submitted and carry out inspections to determine the facility's status. This is done as a means of protecting the public, which requires a multi-agency approach. For example, the municipal corporation must sign off on the structural safety of the facilities, while the Jamaica Fire Brigade ensures that at least the minimum fire safety standards are met, and the site inspection done by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, our team, assesses the accommodations, equipment, among other aspects of the facility.
That is Cynthia Lewis Graham of the Ministry of Health, right? She's the director of the Standards and Regulation Division in the ministry. Guyana, the Cooperative Republic of Ghana, a part of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and now one of the, if not the fastest growing economy in the world. Guyana has had a difficult history since gaining independence from Britain in the mid-1960s, 66, I recall. It has been bedeviled by racial politics. It went through a period of virtual political dictatorship under the late Forbes Burnham. It was a country where its people were fleeing to North America, principally to the US and Canada, in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Compared to Jamaica, it's a huge country. Jamaica is only 4,500 square miles. I can't wrap my head around kilometers. Old school. 4,500 square miles. Guyana is 83,000 square miles. So Jamaica can drop into Guyana many times over. And Guyana was always seen as the backwater of the Caribbean. But all that is now changing with the discovery of oil over the last 5 years. Guyana is now not only the fastest growing economy in the world, but it is booming. It is booming. It is now sitting on billions of barrels of oil. Yeah? Billions. At least 11 billion barrels of oil Guyana is sitting on. Which means, based on its population, it's sparsely populated for 83,000 square miles. Less than 1 million people. Yeah, about 800,000 people. Yeah? Guyana is beginning to hit the international news now because of the oil wealth that it has suddenly unearthed. The Venezuelan ruler, Nicolas Maduro, you would have heard of his attempts to resurrect Venezuela's claim to the Essequibo region of Guyana. Yeah? Out of sheer what's the word for that kind of behavior? Yeah? But anyway, oil comes with its pluses and its minuses. And you'd know about the curse of oil. And Guyana has to be careful now that it manages its oil wealth in a way that prevents it falling prey to the fate of so many other countries which discovered oil. It has to find a way to manage that wealth so it benefits the people of Guyana and it doesn't fall into the kind of descent into malfeasance and corruption that places like Nigeria has fallen. Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa and the wealthiest in terms of oil. And the people of Nigeria see it as a curse. Oil. Well, Guyana has to be careful that it does not fall into that trap. And the president of Guyana is relatively young man, Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, he said that recently there's a stubborn perception in the developed world that a country like Guyana doesn't know how to handle the wealth that comes with the discovery of oil. He was speaking recently in New York, where he accepted the Legacy Award from his alma mater, the University of the West Indies American Foundation for UWI. Dr. Ali said there's an almost sinister belief that non-white leaders lack the knowledge and intelligence to harness resource wealth for the benefit of their people.
I don't think it's only steeped in a colonial perspective. I think it's steeped in the psyche of many in the developed world. And it's not only for Guyana. In the developing world, many of the leaders believe, and many of the international systems are designed to believe, that we in the developing world are incapable. We lack this sophistication.
We're dunce.
We don't have the ability.
Yes.
We don't have capacity and capability.
Yes, there's that perception. Yes, there's that perception. And it's more than a perception, there's evidence for it. Yes, there's evidence. You know, the people, for example, of South Africa are going to the polls at the end of the month, 30 years after apartheid came to an end and we saw the rise and the election of Mandela in 1994. And South Africa, 30 years later, is an embarrassment to those of us who championed the anti-apartheid struggle that led to democracy in South Africa in 1994. It's an embarrassment. Corruption, kleptocracy, crime, economic decline, to the point where, for the first time in those 30 years, the ANC, the African National Congress, which led the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, is facing the dismal reality of a political backsliding at the end of the month. So there's more than a perception that somehow non-white leaders are unable to manage the affairs of their country. Well, Dr. Irfan Ali says he's on a mission to change those perceptions and shape perspectives about how countries like Guyana are able to do right by their people.
What we did not have was the opportunity to build that capacity and capability because it was taken away from us.
Yes.
Because we were denied it. And now we have the opportunity to build that capacity and capability. We should not allow it to happen again. We should not allow a different form of colonization to our thinking process. So I believe that, and I've said this before, that this is for us to change. This is a perception for us to change. And we must change it with strong management, good governance, and demonstrating through results that we have the capability and we have the ability to manage our resources and to do what is best for our citizens.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Irfan Ali. Let's see how it pans out there in Guyana.